Ladies and gentlemen, if you've ever loved someone who didn't know how to love you back, this message is for you. Today we're uncovering what really happens when a good woman gets hurt and why her comeback is her greatest power. If you felt unseen, unappreciated, or broken by someone you gave your heart to, let's dive into the topic that will not only validate your pain, but show you how to turn it into personal power. This isn't just healing, it's transformation. If you're ready to grow stronger, love smarter, and never settle again, hit that subscribe button and join a community that gets it. When a good woman is wounded by love, she doesn't fall apart the way people expect. There may be tears, quiet nights, and moments where her heart feels too heavy to carry, but destruction is never her endgame. The world might see her silence and mistake it for defeat, but what's really happening is transformation. She is not broken, she is becoming. Something deep within her begins to shift, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. She begins to look at herself with new eyes, not the ones that question her worth, but the ones that remember it. The mirror stops being a place of self-blame and starts becoming a place of reconnection. The ache doesn't go away immediately, but it starts to speak in new tones, less of longing and more of truth. She doesn't chase closure because she realizes closure is something she can give to herself. In the quiet after the storm, she rediscovers her own voice, the one she may have dimmed to keep peace, to be understood, to hold on. And once that voice grows louder, so does her confidence. She begins to unlearn the ways she once tried to earn love, realizing that love doesn't need proving, only receiving. There's a reckoning that happens when she realizes she bent too much, stretched too far, and excused too often. But instead of shame, she greets that reckoning with resolve. Her softness doesn't harden, but it becomes wiser, more discerning. She becomes fiercely protective of her time, her space, and her energy. Not in a defensive way, but in a way that says, I finally see myself. And in that seeing, she begins to glow again. Quietly at first, then undeniably. The process is never linear. Some days she'll feel 10 feet tall, other days she'll revisit old conversations in her mind, wondering if she missed a sign. But those moments aren't setbacks, they're steps. Every time she remembers something painful, she pairs it with a new promise to herself. The promise to never shrink for love again. The promise to never mistake comfort for connection. She starts to rewrite her standards, not out of bitterness, but out of self-awareness. She realizes that healing isn't about erasing the past, but about building something better on top of it. The version of her that once tolerated confusion now craves clarity. The version of her that once feared solitude now embraces it. And in this growth, she no longer seeks validation, only alignment. As she evolves, her world subtly begins to shift. The people she attracts change. The conversations she entertains deepen. She's no longer drawn to chaos masked as chemistry. Instead, she starts noticing the quiet strength of consistency, kindness, and presence. Her taste transforms not just in others, but in herself. She wants more out of her own life, more depth, more peace, more joy. She reconnects with the things that light her up, not because someone else sees them as worthy, but because she does. She no longer waits to be chosen. She realizes that she is the chooser. And in that power, she creates a life that doesn't revolve around someone else's potential, but around her own purpose. She doesn't announce this change. She doesn't need to. There's a shift in her walk, her laugh, her energy. It's the kind of shift that happens when a woman reclaims her narrative. People may not be able to pinpoint it, but they'll feel it. They'll sense that her peace can't be disturbed so easily. They'll notice she listens more to herself than to others' opinions. This new version of her doesn't need to prove she's healed. Her boundaries say it for her. Her presence says it for her. And while others may look for the girl she used to be, she's too busy becoming the woman she was always meant to be. The change is not about what she lost. It's about what she found in herself. Every day she builds a life rooted in self-respect, not regret. She doesn't hide her heart, but she guards it with discernment. She understands now that love given to the wrong place doesn't mean love is the problem. It means she's learning where to place it. Her tenderness remains, but it now sits beside strength. The kind of strength that says, I can walk away with grace. She doesn't need drama to feel alive anymore. She finds excitement in her growth, not in emotional roller coasters. She chooses ease, effort, and emotional safety. She trusts herself again, not because things are perfect, but because she knows she can handle the imperfect with wisdom. This is a woman who's not afraid to feel deeply, but even less afraid to walk away when something doesn't align. The evolution becomes less about forgetting and more about remembering who she was before she was dimmed. She starts to reclaim dreams that had been paused. She takes herself out, dresses up for no one, and loves the way her own laughter fills a room. She starts writing again, painting again, walking without her phone, things that make her feel alive, without needing anyone else's company to do it. Her life doesn't look like a reaction to pain, it looks like a response to love. The kind of love she's finally giving herself. The kind of love that doesn't ask her to perform, fix, or prove. She's not waiting to be rescued, she's already standing. She's aware now that healing doesn't mean going back to who she was, it means stepping into who she's always had the capacity to be. The pain was not a punishment, it was a portal. Through it, she discovered resilience she didn't know she had. And while others may only see the highlight reel of her glow up, she knows the quiet nights and messy cries that built it. She honors her journey not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Every scar is proof she showed up for herself. She doesn't need applause or validation. Her peace is her reward. Her story isn't defined by the chapter that hurt her, but by the one she wrote after. This is not a woman hardened by experience. This is a woman softened by truth. A woman who now knows that real love doesn't require losing yourself. She is no longer in search of something to complete her. She is whole. Complete in her complexity, her softness, her strength. The future excites her, not because she knows exactly what's coming, but because she knows she gets to choose what stays. Her eyes are no longer clouded by illusion. Her decisions are no longer driven by fear. There is freedom in her voice and certainty in her silence. She has become her own sanctuary. And now when she smiles, it's not to convince anyone she's okay. It's because she truly is. She laughs lighter. She speaks slower. She rests deeper. There's nothing performative about her peace. She knows the cost of losing herself, and she refuses to pay that price again. She walks through life with grace, not to be admired, but because she's finally in rhythm with her own soul. The woman who once doubted her own reflection now sees divinity in every flaw. The woman who once pleaded to be seen now sees herself. And that is the kind of transformation no one can undo. There comes a moment in every woman's life when the pain that once confused her suddenly makes sense. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or closure. It arrives quietly, through reflection, stillness, and truth. She doesn't seek to erase what happened, but to understand what it taught her. And through that lens, the entire experience transforms. No longer a wound, but a window. A way of seeing what she had ignored, what she had excused, what she had hoped would be different. The tears she shed now feel like cleansing water, not signs of weakness. Her sadness begins to shift into wisdom, and she realizes the power in what she has survived. The loss becomes her liberation, because it broke illusions she didn't know she was living inside. She starts to see the role she played, not to blame herself, but to reclaim her power. She understands now that people reveal themselves in actions, not apologies. That emotional chaos isn't a sign of passion, but a signal that something essential is missing. In hindsight, she notices the red flags she painted over with hope. She sees how many times she offered grace without receiving growth. And in those realizations, she doesn't grow angry, she grows aware. That awareness becomes her greatest ally. It sharpens her inner voice, the one she'll listen to next time instead of silencing. She begins to honor her gut, trust her instincts, and protect her peace. The past becomes a teacher, not a trap. Where she once sought answers from others, she now finds them within herself. She no longer needs someone to tell her why things went wrong. The answer is clear. She outgrew something that was never built to hold her. She realizes that love isn't supposed to hurt, confuse, or make her feel small. Love is not proven in moments of desperation, but shown in consistency, safety, and truth. Her heart, once so eager to be understood, now finds its strength in being respected. The lesson was never about changing someone else. It was about learning to stop changing herself to make something fit. She was not too much. She was in the wrong room. And now she chooses rooms where her wholeness is welcomed, not trimmed down. This clarity doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in waves. During quiet coffee mornings, during deep conversations with friends, during silent rides in the car. It comes in laughter that finally feels unburdened. It comes in the way she breathes deeper, lighter, freer. She starts seeing beauty in the small things again, noticing how life keeps moving, how she's still standing. She remembers parts of herself that had been put on hold, her creativity, her dreams, her joy. She dives back into life, not as someone trying to distract herself, but as someone who has been reborn through reflection. Each day she shows up. She's choosing herself again, and that choice, made over and over, becomes her foundation. She no longer feels the need to prove she's healed. Her boundaries speak louder than any post, quote, or explanation. She realizes that healing is not performative, it's personal. It's in how she no longer allows certain energies into her life. It's in how she doesn't chase, beg, or wait to be chosen. She lives with intention now. She speaks with self-respect. She no longer confuses intensity with intimacy. In fact, she no longer confuses anything. What once clouded her judgment is now crystal clear. She knows what love looks like because she knows what it doesn't. That knowledge doesn't make her cold. It makes her conscious. The experience that once made her feel powerless is now the very reason she feels strong. She survived something she once thought she couldn't live without. That is no small feat. She built herself from the inside out, not to prove anything to the world, but because she finally saw what she deserved. She stopped writing a story where her worth depended on someone else's role. Her narrative now centers around peace, purpose, and progress. She stopped waiting for an apology and gave herself permission to move on, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. And in that decision, she reclaimed her time, her voice, and her future. There's a calmness in her now that wasn't there before. She's no longer reactive, she's reflective. She doesn't try to fix what isn't hers to fix. She recognizes when someone isn't capable of showing up, and she no longer takes it personally. That discernment allows her to walk away without drama, knowing that silence can be louder than confrontation. Her energy isn't scattered anymore. It's grounded, intentional, sacred. She doesn't pour into emptiness. She doesn't water dead plants. Her love still runs deep, but now it's protected. She has learned the value of being selective with her heart. What once made her feel rejected now feels like redirection. She sees now that she was spared more than she was denied, that what felt like loss was really life making space for alignment. And in that understanding, her past stops haunting her. It becomes part of her evolution, not her identity. She walks with grace, not because she's unbothered, but because she's unshaken. The lesson was never about being fearless, it was about learning courage. And courage, she learned, means leaving even when it hurts, choosing herself even when it's hard, believing in better, even when she hasn't seen it yet. That's who she is. Now, she speaks differently, listens differently, dreams differently. Her eyes still hold softness, but they're no longer naive. Her heart still opens, but only to what feels real. She doesn't punish the next chapter for the pain of the last one. She simply turns the page with intention. Her standards are not rooted in ego, but in experience. She's not jaded, she's just aware. Aware of what love actually requires. Aware of the energy she brings and the energy she allows. And in that awareness, she doesn't fear love again. She just won't settle for anything less than it. So when people see her now and wonder how she became so clear, so grounded, so radiant, the answer is simple. She learned. She learned through silence, through heartbreak, through reflection. She learned what she needs, what she values, what she refuses to compromise. She no longer carries the weight of the past like a burden. She carries it like armor, light but strong. And every time she shows up in her truth, she honors the woman she became through the fire. That woman, the one who chose growth over comfort, clarity over chaos, and self-love over settling, that woman is unstoppable. There comes a moment when she finally stops trying to make sense of why things hurt the way they did. Not because she's numb, but because she's awake now. Awake to the way she overlooked her own feelings to prioritize someone else's comfort. Awake to how many times she softened her boundaries in the name of love. For too long, she tried to find a balance between what she deserved and what she was being given, and the two were never equal. She replayed moments in her head, questioning if she was asking for too much, when in truth she was asking for the bare minimum. Slowly, she begins to see that her capacity to care should never require her to carry everything alone. And with that realization, a new voice emerges inside her, firm, clear, and compassionate. The voice that finally says, "This isn't what I want anymore." That's when her healing truly begins. She doesn't need a dramatic moment to decide she's done explaining her worth. It happens quietly, like exhaling after holding her breath for too long. The weight of overthinking, overgiving, and overcompensating starts to lift. She begins to reclaim her time, her energy, and her presence. The story she once clung to of fixing, saving, or enduring no longer fits her. Instead, she starts telling a new story, one where her needs are not a burden, but a baseline. She stops minimizing her emotions just to keep the peace. She stops overextending herself in relationships that leave her feeling emotionally undernourished. The clarity she's found wasn't forced, it was earned, one hard lesson at a time. And now she can no longer deny what she knows deep down. She deserves more. It's not that she stops loving deeply. In fact, her love becomes more powerful, more intentional. But she no longer offers it carelessly. She becomes thoughtful about where her energy goes, realizing that love given to the wrong place becomes self-abandonment. She stops trying to rescue, convince, or carry what isn't hers. That impulse to fix has been replaced by the instinct to protect her peace. She no longer feels guilty for walking away from situations that drain her. The people pleaser in her retires, replaced by someone who finally honors her own needs. She knows now that boundaries are not walls, they're doors that open only to what aligns with her self-respect. And every time she says no to something that feels off, she's saying yes to something deeper within herself. Her standards evolve, not because she's bitter, but because she's better informed. She stops mistaking effort for alignment, attention for affection, or promises for presence. She recognizes that some patterns aren't love, they're simply repetition. She notices how she used to make excuses, not out of weakness, but out of hope. And while hope is a beautiful thing, she realizes it needs to be rooted in reality, not fantasy. The more she tells herself the truth, the freer she becomes. She no longer avoids hard conversations with herself. Instead, she leans into them, knowing that honesty is the only way forward. Her growth isn't about becoming someone new, it's about becoming someone honest. Honest about her worth, her desires, and her limits. There is no revenge in her healing, no bitterness in her strength, just awareness. She doesn't need to prove how strong she is by staying in places that no longer feel like home. She proves her strength by leaving, by choosing herself, even when it's hard. The person she used to be would have called that selfish, but the woman she's becoming knows it's survival. She understands now that it's not her job to endure what makes her shrink. She doesn't need to be the most patient, most forgiving, or most understanding person in the room to feel worthy. She just needs to be true to herself. And being true means listening when something doesn't feel right, and doing something about it. It's in the quiet moments that she realizes how far she's come. The moments when she chooses silence instead of re-explaining herself. The moments when she doesn't text, doesn't chase, doesn't justify, not because she's playing games, but because she finally respects her own space. She stops putting herself last on her own list. She stops bending into shapes that make others more comfortable, but leave her feeling erased. She no longer measures love by how much she sacrifices. Now she measures it by how seen and safe she feels. And in that space where she puts herself first, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity, she begins to thrive. She understands that healing isn't always pretty. Sometimes it looks like crying on the kitchen floor. Sometimes it looks like sitting alone in a cafe because she needs to feel her own company again. Sometimes it means walking away from familiar chaos into unfamiliar peace. And peace, at first, can feel lonely when she's not used to it, but eventually, peace becomes her baseline. She learns to breathe without waiting for the next disappointment. She starts to believe that love shouldn't feel like a guessing game. Her new version of love starts with how she treats herself, softly, honestly, and without condition. That's the love she's building her life around now. She doesn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. Her decisions don't need to be justified. Her no is a full sentence. Her standards are rooted in clarity, not fear. She no longer fears being alone because she's seen how powerful she becomes when she stands on her own. She doesn't fill silence with distractions. She embraces it, knowing it's in that silence that she hears herself the loudest. Every time she chooses not to explain away her feelings, she reaffirms her trust in her own voice. She doesn't need approval, she needs alignment. And the more she chooses alignment, the less willing she is to settle for anything less. There is grace in how she moves forward, not with anger, but with certainty. The certainty that she's done making excuses for energy that confuses her. That she's done staying in spaces that require her to dim her light. The woman she's becoming doesn't beg for love. She attracts it by being whole. She's not afraid to walk alone because she knows she's never truly alone when she's grounded in her worth. She doesn't need to be anyone's choice to feel chosen. She chooses herself now consistently and unapologetically. That choice becomes her power. It becomes her peace. And from that place, everything changes. She knows now that walking away isn't a loss. It's a declaration that her heart is valuable, that her time is sacred, that her love is not a test to be passed, but a gift to be cherished. The cycle of over-explaining is over. The habit of doubting herself is done. She speaks with conviction, acts with clarity, and moves with purpose. She's not hard to love. She just refuses to be loved poorly ever again. Her evolution isn't loud, but it's real. It's in how she chooses differently. It's in how she loves herself enough to never again make excuses for pain disguised as love. There is a quiet kind of transformation that happens when a woman finally lets go of what wasn't meant for her. At first it feels like loss, like something is missing, like she's left with silence where there once was noise. But over time, that silence starts to feel like peace. Her life no longer revolves around waiting for a message, for a change, for a different outcome. She begins to fill the space with her own voice, her own dreams, her own presence. She starts doing things not out of reaction, but out of intention. The love she once poured outward begins to be poured inward. What used to feel like loneliness becomes the foundation of solitude, and in that solitude she starts to rise. The world around her might not immediately notice the shift. It's not loud or dramatic. It's subtle. Like the way she no longer hesitates to say no, like how she no longer justifies her boundaries, like how she doesn't explain her choices to those who never truly understood her heart. She's no longer performing in hopes of being chosen. She's choosing herself in ways she never had the courage to before. There is no vengeance in her evolution, only clarity. She no longer competes for someone's attention because she's learned that the kind of love that's worth keeping doesn't require convincing. The glow isn't because someone loves her now, it's because she finally loves herself without question. What once felt like rejection becomes redirection. She begins to see that being pushed away was life's way of protecting her from something that was never going to grow her. What looked like the end was actually a beginning she didn't know she needed. The hurt she carried doesn't vanish overnight, but it becomes lighter each time she refuses to carry what isn't hers. She stops blaming herself for someone else's inability to meet her where she stood. She understands now that her worth was never tied to how much she was loved by someone else. It was always hers. She just needed to remember. And now that she has, she moves differently, with softness, with strength, with unshakable peace. The energy around her shifts as she becomes more grounded in her truth. She attracts connections that feel safe, conversations that feel genuine, and relationships that require no performance. She stops settling for breadcrumbs because she knows what the full meal of love and respect tastes like now. She's no longer impressed by intensity without consistency. She doesn't mistake chaos for chemistry. She's experienced the difference between attention and intention, and now she only accepts the latter. She's not bitter, she's just informed. She's not guarded, she's just selective. And that selectiveness is what keeps her from repeating the same story with a different face. There's no longer a need to rush. She's not racing toward love like it's something she needs to catch before it disappears. She understands timing, alignment, and the importance of being whole before letting someone else in. Her life isn't on pause until someone joins it. It's already full. She's built routines that honor her joy, practices that protect her peace, and goals that inspire her growth. She's no longer waiting for someone to validate her path. She's already on it, walking with purpose and presence. Love, if and when it comes, is a beautiful addition, not a completion. She completes herself now, every day, in the way she shows up for her own life. She no longer defines healing by how much she smiles or how quickly she's moved on. Healing for her looks like consistency. It looks like honoring the promises she makes to herself. It looks like not texting when she's lonely, not revisiting the past when she's sad, and not compromising her boundaries just to feel less alone. She understands that her growth didn't happen in the big moments, it happened in the small choices, choosing silence over chaos, choosing peace over patterns, choosing herself even when it felt unfamiliar. And now that unfamiliar feeling has become her new home, a place where her value is non-negotiable. When she looks in the mirror now, she sees a woman who came back to herself. Not perfectly, not quickly, but completely. A woman who knows her worth because she fought to remember it. A woman who's no longer trying to be everything for everyone, but everything for herself. The scars she carries are no longer symbols of pain, they're proof of perseverance. She wears them not with shame, but with quiet pride, because they remind her of the moments she didn't give up on herself. Of the nights she chose to heal instead of hate, of the days she got out of bed when her heart was still heavy. That woman is still healing, but she's also thriving. She doesn't need closure from someone else to close the chapter. She creates her own closure by walking away and choosing not to look back. She stops opening doors that only lead to confusion. She stops expecting someone to show up differently when they've already shown her who they are. She listens to the truth even when it hurts, because now she's more committed to her peace than to proving a point. Her heart is still open, but only to what feels safe, seen, and sincere. She no longer lowers her standards out of fear of being alone, because she's seen what waiting for bare minimum love cost her, and she'll never pay that price again. In conversations, she's more present. In decisions, she's more grounded. She doesn't second-guess her needs or shrink to fit into someone else's comfort zone. Her presence is felt differently because it's rooted in authenticity. She no longer wears masks to be accepted. She knows that the right people will meet her in her wholeness, not her performance. Her days are filled with intentional choices, her nights with restful peace. She doesn't carry the emotional chaos that once lived inside her. She's cleaned house mentally, emotionally, spiritually. What remains is who she truly is, clear, calm, and deeply connected to herself. This version of her isn't just surviving, she's thriving. Not because everything is perfect, but because she's no longer tied to what broke her. She's chosen to rise from it, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. She no longer defines herself by who left or what didn't last. Her story is no longer rooted in who didn't love her properly. It's rooted in how she learned to love herself fiercely. The love she gives now isn't out of lack, but out of abundance. She's not waiting to be saved. She's already saved herself. And from this place of power, she's building a life that reflects the woman she fought to become.